Governor Newsom has made it very clear what he's trying to do. I think he completely lied to people when he said he didn't want this to happen. 100% he wants this to happen. He's running for president. He's going to raise $100 million and be on every TV station. Actually, college football starts this weekend. Largely started last weekend. It's on tonight. I love college football, and I'm worried sick that I'm going to have to look at Governor Newsom for the entire football season until November on all the time, because swing voters watch college football.
He's been one of the top political consultants in the state for Republicans. He's done a lot of work as a staffer and consultant on various redistricting efforts over the years. He's now a deputy district attorney. Matt Rexroad.
Matt Rexroad, welcome to State of Gold.
Hey, thanks for having me, John.
It's an honor to have you, and you're one of the leading experts in California on gerrymandering, redistricting, all of the stuff that is really the hot, burning issue right now in the state of California.
The list of people who are experts on redistricting in California is pretty small. I would say I'm probably on that list, but it's not a huge list. And usually we only talk in years that ends in 0 or 1, and we happen to be talking in a year that ends in 5. So it's very odd.
Yeah, it is odd, but you're being very modest because I know your background and modest guy in general. But let me ask you this. In one word, how would you describe Prop 50?
Presidential?
Yeah. I mean, it is a Newsom play for 2028. That's pretty bald-faced. I read also that you called these maps political weapons. Can you elaborate on that? What you meant?
Yes. Well, a couple things. One is I think this whole redistricting thing nationwide is a huge mistake. I've thought so since it started being talked about a few weeks ago. And I think what they're doing in Texas is wrong. I think what they're doing in California is equally wrong. But the issue is that if you allow mid-decade redistricting, which we don't allow local governments to do in California, city council, board of supervisors, school boards, you don't allow it because if you simply get a majority at some point, some election during the decade, then you just simply take the minority and you redistrict them out of existence or into an even smaller minority. And it becomes a weapon of the majority where you bludgeon the minority to death and political death. And I just think that's poor public policy, and it's not good for anyone.
I'm so glad you mentioned that this is not good in California. It's not good in Texas. It's not good anywhere. I mean, the negative knock-on effects for American democracy are terrible. So in 2010, California voters put, map creation for congressional districts to an independent commission of citizens, Democrats, Republicans, and I guess independents. Take us back just for a sec and explain to our listeners and viewers, why was it so important then, and why is it so important now?
Well, there's been some historical revision in people's minds in terms of the number of people that supported this. If you actually go back and look at the numbers, the first effort was actually really close. It barely passed, and that was an effort to have the state legislature and the Board of Equalization drawn by this independent commission. And they specifically did not include the congressional districts because they didn't want to draw the fire and the ire of Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats in Washington, D.C. And then a few years later, they said, well, we should probably include congressional lines with this commission. And so that measure actually passed overwhelmingly. Off the top of my head, I think it was like 63% or something like that. But it clearly passed, and the opposition to it was a lot of members of Congress who really wanted to have those lines drawn internally in the legislature where they could control them. But it did pass, and we've had now 2 rounds of an independent redistricting commission in California, which I support. I like independent redistricting commissions. I have been critical of the last 2 efforts. Not that they didn't do a good job, but they could have done a better job with the information they had available in terms of how they administered their tasks.
All right. Got it. So these maps are out there, right? We've seen these maps. What's your reaction to the maps? And what are the most egregious aspects of the maps we've seen?
When the maps came out, I actually started to laugh almost immediately because most people probably listening to this or watching this have never been to Modoc County. The capital of Modoc County, or this county seat, is Alturas, which most people haven't been to. And it's a jaunt, right? And Alturas, which is way up in the northeastern corner of California, is connected to the northern landing of the Golden Gate Bridge. Those communities in Marin County and Modoc County have absolutely nothing in common. And my friend Paul Mitchell, who drew these maps, I immediately, I was like, shame. That's just horrible that he did that. But then what else caught my eye right away is I started looking to the east where Congressman Kiley's district is. The district is shaped like an elephant. It 100% looks like an elephant. And I don't have a version of it here to show you, but
We'll put it on. We'll put it on screen.
there's clearly an elephant's trunk there that comes down in from Placer County, and that's just kind of outrageous in terms of a a message being sent to Congressman Kiley or others, which I think is also totally inappropriate for redrawing lines to be drawing animals out of districts. That's instead of a gerrymander or salamander, as it was called in Massachusetts by Governor Geary. It's an elephant being drawn by Governor Newsom, and he should be embarrassed by that.
Indeed, yeah. So it's the elephant in the room.
Yeah, well, not
But
it's the elephant in Placer County, that's for sure.
but a bump. What is this kind of gerrymander, Matt, if it passes, do to the integrity just of the representation of people? Because again, we have deeply rural districts being combined with, parts of Marin County, yoga moms and lattes, stereotypically, more than that in Marin County, but to be stereotypical, what does that do to the representation for the people?
Well, you really hit on it. Because rural communities tend to have a lot of white residents, it tends to really they don't have Voting Rights Act protection. The best legal way to go about a partisan gerrymander like this is to basically take rural Republican communities and divide them up all over the place, and that's what they did with Congressman Amalfa's district and Congressman Kiley's district to get to their new districts that they want to have happen. And so it does get rid of any of those rural communities of interest for a partisan gerrymander. Now, I would point out that partisan gerrymanders largely the Supreme Court has largely allowed partisan gerrymanders. What they don't allow is racial gerrymandering. The difficult thing, though, is that in some of the districts, like the district that Congressman Valadeo represents and Congressman Fong represents, a racial gerrymander looks exactly like a partisan gerrymander. And so it's just exactly the same thing. The Latinos in that part of the state tend to be Democrat. The white people tend to be
Right.
Republican. And that's the exact same line. If you were doing one or the other, you would draw exactly the same line. And you can see that in Congressman Fong's district with the little dinosaur arms going into Kings County.
Right. Well, let's talk about the courts. Two challenges so far: the state Supreme Court by Republicans. Both have been annulled, basically. What do you think of their approach so far in the state courts, and where does this go in terms of the court system?
Well, I think that the Republicans so far have really just been kind of throwing things at the wall to see what sticks in terms of some of these challenges. To say that there had to be a notice requirement or whatever else. When you have a 2/3 votes of both houses of the legislature, you're going to be able to get through that. The legislature needs to be able to act quickly in times of an emergency. I don't think this is actually a redistricting emergency. I'm not sure there ever really is one, but that was the courts were going to uphold the legislature's ability to do that. They met a supermajority vote in both houses, and that was going to be protected. But legally, we have a couple different options. We have procedural measures to be able to get the Prop 50 on the ballot. And probably the next thing we're going to see is a challenge to the title and summary, which was done by Attorney General Rob Bonta's office. It's very favorable to the governor. I'm sure that the polling helped them craft that message, and I can't quote it for you word for word, but it's very favorable to the proponents of the measure. But then you're going to have some legal challenges that come along later, most likely in federal court under the Voting Rights Act. And you might see some of those challenges later that would be entirely different. And they would be able to allow the map to be done and to sever it, basically to be able to look at individual districts and make changes because they might violate the Voting Rights Act. And I would point out that you have Harmeet Dillon, who's from San Francisco, an attorney. She now runs the Civil Rights Division of
Right.
the Department of Justice, and she would be very involved in that if it happens.
Right. Right. I gather that I'm forgetting the legal term, but I gather that the federal courts, let alone the Supreme Court, might not take up this challenge until there's actually been a vote and a result.
It wouldn't be ripe yet.
It wouldn't be right. Okay,
Yeah.
so
And
you
nobody would have standing because it still hasn't been approved, right? If the
hasn't been
measure
approved.
fails, or it's not going to be able to be enacted.
Right. So this is post November 4th. So we'll have to see. If you were a betting man, Matt, today, what would you expect the outcome of this is going to be?
Well, procedurally, I think that it's going to get on the ballot, and I think there's a whole lot of different things that could happen in terms of the substance of it. There's a very important case in Louisiana that is going on that basically an argument can be made that the Voting Rights Act violates the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution, and there's some people who have articulated that. They would like the Supreme Court to rule on that. Potentially, that Louisiana measure might be able to be that vehicle, but there's a great deal of uncertainty there, and so I don't really know in terms of you were just asking for a legal prediction or a political prediction regarding the measure.
The latter.
Well, the latter, I it seems to me that people are forgetting that we have some of these outcomes before. I know that a lot of my Republican friends can't stand Gavin Newsom. I totally understand that. He's not my favorite either. But we just attempted to recall him. A lot of people did, and he survived it quite well. And in this case, we're going to have an election where we're going to have, and people will want to say this is a redistricting measure. I love redistricting. I wish we talked about it all the time, but that's not what people are going to be voting on. They're going to be voting on, do you support Governor Newsom or do you support President Trump? And in
Right.
California, if you were to be a betting person, you would be crazy to bet on President Trump. You would bet on Governor Newsom. He's won every election he's ever run in California. President Trump he did the best in California just this past November against Kamala Harris, and he lost by 18 points. So I certainly would like this thing to be defeated, but nobody would bet on nobody should bet on the no side being able to defeat this, because it's not about redistricting. It's not about good government. It's a power play.
Right, 100%. Let me ask you a last question on this topic, and we'll cover a couple more. If you were advising the No on 50 movement on strategy, what would your advice be in a couple phrases?
I don't, I mean, I don't really have one. For them, I think they have to go deep in the polling to be able to look at that and be able to figure out those messages. But I would imagine there's not one universal message that works. And especially if you're trying to push back on a Trump bad, Newsom good measure from the other side. I mean, Governor Newsom's made it very clear what he's trying to do. I think he completely lied to people when he said he didn't want this to happen. 100% he wants this to happen. He's running for president. He's going to raise $100 million and be on every TV station. Actually, college football starts this weekend. Largely started last weekend. It's on tonight. I love college football, and I'm worried sick that I'm going to have to look at Governor Newsom for the entire football season until November on all the time, because swing voters watch college football, and that's horrible. It's like graffiti on college football.
That's really well said. Well, let's just hope that, I don't know, they reject his ads. Let's just zoom out for one sec, Matt. You've seen a lot of California politics. How does the era we're in right now compare to past eras in terms of just political impact and political risk for citizens?
The problem is that there are things happening right now in California politics, and actually just politics overall, that we're accepting that happens. I mean, I can't imagine a president of the United States or a governor of California dropping swear words in the middle of press conferences. I mean, we know that Richard Nixon did it in private because we had tapes of it right later on. But, and I'm sure there were other slips of the tongue, but you never saw, elected leaders behaving like that. And Governor Newsom right now has decided that he's going to try to play at the same level as President Trump. And that's fine if he wants to do that, but you can't say the president's acting horribly and condemn it and then turn around and behave like that. In my mind, I think that's inconsistent. And so, but this isn't about redistricting or Prop 50. It's about Governor Newsom running for president, which is exactly what he's doing right now.
Yeah. I think looking at Newsom, everything needs to be seen through the screen of 2028, getting the nomination. I think everything lines up underneath that. Everything really always has for him. And
the other problem, though, is that you have people who generally operated within rules of decorum, rules of conflicts of interest, and taking care of that kind of stuff in an appropriate way. we have pardons going out, and we from the federal government and the state government for people who never would have been pardoned years ago. I'm very critical of the president for pardoning people on January 6th who beat police officers. It's ridiculous. And Governor Newsom is pardoning people who did some horrible things as well. But actually, Governor Schwarzenegger actually also pardoned some people he shouldn't have either.
Yeah.
And that's just an abuse of power in my mind, and it's not appropriate good public policy.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. All right, my friend, we're going to finish with some rapid fire.
Okay.
5 questions, word or phrase, whatever comes to mind. You're king for a day. Single biggest thing you do to fix California.
It's a good question. Can I come back to that?
You can. Which California leader, past or present, do you respect most?
Actually, my answer for that is two people, Governor Wilson and Governor Brown, and I'll tell you why. Both of those gentlemen could make the trains run on time. What I really want from a governor is somebody who can make things go. And, with Governor Newsom, I think if there's a natural disaster of some kind, he's looking for the TV cameras. Gray Davis didn't know what was going on. Didn't have as much confidence in Governor Schwarzenegger, but if there were fires or emergency or a fiscal problem, Governor Wilson and Governor Brown had the team and the group of people in the room to be able to make it happen, and I respect that.
I appreciate that. What do outsiders get wrong about California politics?
So I think a lot of people about outsiders think that money has more control than it actually does. I don't. I think there's people who believe that there are actual bribes being offered in the legislature, and I worked there for a long time. I didn't see that happen. Maybe things have changed dramatically since then. The only time I've ever been offered, as when I was an elected official, an inappropriate contribution was from a gentleman from another country, and I think in his case he thought he was doing what he did in his own country, and I had to politely decline and tell him that he can't do that anymore, and he was very embarrassed, and that's just not the way they behave. But I think that most politicians are actually more honest than people give them credit for.
You couldn't accept the goats,
No, yeah, no.
the cattle. All right, last two. What gives you hope?
What gives me hope is when I look at my kids who are getting more information. The hope is that they're actually a little bit more involved in politics sometimes, and they're aware of it. But at the same time, some of the information they get is very wrong. So I love the information flow, but I just wish it was better quality.
Got it. Finish this sentence. California is
Trending down.
trending down. Sad to say. All right, let's go back to the original question. You're king for a day. Single biggest thing you do to fix California.
After what I watched today, I participated in a parole board hearing, and I watched just something that I thought I'd never see before. And so I'm watching the way we're treating public safety very cavalierly, and we have people who are well intentioned but very wrong in terms of what's going on in the world and out in the streets right now.
Very important last point to make. Thank you for that, Matt. Really appreciate your time and your expertise. Thank you for having this conversation.
Yeah, thanks to you and Mason for having me.
Appreciate it.